Hi, and welcome to this episode where we're going to go through the four-step process in dealing with difficult people or difficult behavior. So, right now, through the paradigm shift that we're going through, there's a lot of chaos happening, and there's a lot of really high frequencies also pouring in, which is creating a lot of active awakening in people as well as healing. And what that does is it creates the activation of shadow, which is then creating a lot of general wobble for people, or there's just, as healing is happening, it's creating a lot of people feeling not grounded, not stable, not steady. When shadow releases, it's a lot of the unconscious wounding. So there can be just a lot of projections happening. There can be a lot of anger. This can also be playing out where we might be getting completely triggered by somebody who's on the world stage. It doesn't have to be somebody that we are in, one-to-one contact with or day-to-day contact with. This can also be somebody that's kind of out there, but we're being consistently triggered by that person. So this exploration, we're going to come at this from a couple different angles, but to keep it really simple and just to really be able to have a go-to step-by-step process can be helpful, because oftentimes when we are really dealing with difficult behavior, it's really difficult for us to ourselves stay in our own heart and stay grounded and to stay centered. So the four steps, and then we'll unpack them all, but the four steps, first one is emotional regulation. The second one is evaluation. Third one is clarity and alignment. And then the fourth one is the power of choice. So as we get into, dealing with difficult people, difficult behavior, one of the most powerful things that we want to do is we want to regulate our emotions. The most important element that as we navigate through these times, through these changes, is that how do we stay in our heart place? How do we stay in our heart center? And that's not easy, because we ourselves might be going through a lot and then dealing with other people's situations and expressions. So we really want to cultivate as much as we can something that is a consistent connection to our heart, so that we have the awareness of when we're out of our heart center. And that could be just coming a couple times a day, placing the hand on the heart and coming into breath and dropping down into the heart. It could be meditating on peace or on love. It could be just coming back consistently throughout the day and focusing on the quality of peace or the quality of love, something like that. Because we want to become, most importantly, aware of when we're pulled out. Emotional regulation, we may have ourselves unresolved energy. And oftentimes, when we have a response to somebody or something, such as anger, fear, injustice, grief, it's because it's unresolved in our own subconscious. And so what we want to do is recognize that and take the emphasis on the outer, what actually stimulated or triggered this response within us, and be able to train ourselves to go inward so that we can focus on, I'm having a response. What is my response? Not even necessarily why, because the left brain is going to want to go to the person that activated it or the situation that's triggering it, when high percentage of the time this is stored, even not even from this lifetime, from our past life experiences, our soul experiences that are stored in our unconscious, and that's why it's coming up to be cleared and released. So that's healing. Healing is we've got unresolved energy or wounding, and that energy is seeking to be balanced, harmonized, transformed, or transmuted. So when we can become aware of, I'm having a response, what's my response? And then start to be aware of it, move it through breath potentially, or just start, sometimes just the awareness enough is it, that's all we need. We want to start to regulate our emotions, because if we don't regulate our emotions and then we respond, we're actually then giving energy to that same energy that which just got triggered from or by. So if I'm angry, if somebody is coming at me with anger and I respond and I get angry and defensive, and then I respond back with anger and defensive behavior or response, I'm giving the same energy back to that energy. And that's, I'm fueling it. Number one, it's like I'm fueling the fire within myself and then within that situation. And then that just starts to build and starts to grow even more. So coming into emotional regulation will also help me to calm a mind, because the other thing we want to do is not give energy to the potential narrative or story that's playing out. So our mind wants to go over and over. They said this, they did this. I can't believe this is happening. Whenever we start to give energy to those thoughts, we're solidifying, we're creating stronger pathways, thought patterns, or we're going to be even more hijacked in that collective thought patterns and thought forms. So when we can start to emotionally regulate, that also means we're starting to regulate where our mind is going, and we start to have, just more awareness of where is the direction going, and do I want it to go in that direction? And I can pull out, and this is the key. Emotional regulation means I want to withdraw my energy from the existing dynamic. This is so powerful, because when we can withdraw our energy from the dynamic, it no longer can sustain itself. And this is how we really disrupt, our past patterns. We might have a history with somebody where there's just this consistent, constant dynamic power struggle that happens. And so when we can learn within ourselves to release that need or desire for that person or anything outside of us to change, be different, we want them to get it or understand. When we can release and let go of that, and we can just come right back into ourselves, emotionally regulate, and withdraw our energy from that dynamic cannot sustain itself. Because from the law of energy, there has to be an energetic reciprocity for a dynamic to sustain itself. And so that means if I'm withdrawing my energy, I'm not giving energy, so I'm not disempowering by leaking or giving away my energy. And I cannot then, or it's going to be way harder for somebody to drain my energy or to hook into my energy field. So emotional regulation is so powerful, and it's, again, the key is to be really gentle with ourselves, especially with this process of emotional regulation, this step, because it takes training, it takes time to really get the feel on how to do it, especially if there's a really strong, big trigger, really strong, just there's a lot of toxicity coming out with a person. So this is the key to, give ourselves the grace and the space to not be perfect in it. And and to be able to withdraw, and we may have to process the energy after. Maybe we did respond back, and then after, we're reflecting on it and we're thinking, I wish I had responded a bit differently. Well, sometimes that's the steps that we need to take in order for us to kind of create the grit, or it's like we're building some inner strength. We're building spiritual strength. Every single opportunity is an experience of that. So sometimes we have the awareness, and sometimes that awareness comes after the fact. Then we can still move the energy after the fact. Next time we're in that situation, we might feel like, okay, I'm aware as it's happening, but I can't change my response still, but I'm aware. So that's movement. We've transformed something there. And then eventually we'll be aware in the dynamic, and then we'll be able to withdraw and or shift our response. And sometimes that's just really being able to stay neutral. It could be just emotionally regulating and moving the energy as we're responding, and then we're able to, kind of respond differently. And that's how we really start to create new, this is where we're starting to create a new future for ourselves. We're starting to create a new path and a new way of doing something and of being. So it does take a bit of time, though. And, ultimately, this is a process where we want to try and do this without judgment. So again, the key is not judging ourselves and potentially not judging the other person. So let's go into step number 2, which is evaluation. In evaluation, what we want to do after we've emotionally regulated, and sometimes you might find these steps kind of go in conjunction, or they might, this doesn't have to be exactly in this order. But evaluation is when we're stepping back and we're asking, okay, well, what is actually even mine? Because even if we've got a response and a trigger, there could be just even a small percent where 20% is our response and 80% is that energy coming at us, and we've just been blasted by that energy. Especially if you're really empathic or sensitive to energy, we can absorb energy and it's not even our energy. So again, the more we know ourselves and the more we can actually step back and take a pause and just really ask, is this actually even mine? How much percent is mine? And again, not trying to get in too much with the head with it. We're trying to just really discern through our own knowing ourselves and knowing our own, kind of intuitive guidance in that moment. Is this mine? And often, even if it isn't ours, if we're meeting it and we're moving the energy, it will transmute the energy anyways. So if you feel like, I don't know, I'm not going to know if it's mine or not, no worries. All we want to do is we want to just start to move the energy anyway. And then we want to reflect on, do I need to set up a boundary here? What is this, presenting for me? Why am I attracting this? Why am I engaged in this dynamic? Is this a dynamic that I can actually withdraw from? So say it's somebody that's just consistently toxic. Is this of resonance any longer for me to be, in relationship with this person or with this dynamic? And most, there's so many variables where we aren't able to actually always withdraw, and we're not necessarily meant to, meaning we have a lot of ties sometimes that we might find ourselves connected to a person, and we're not in a situation at the time to be able to do that, walk away from that relationship. So when those situations happen, those are significant relationships where we can really have an opportunity of significant learning, growing, or healing. And that's how we really want to approach it if possible, is what am I learning? How am I growing? What's my opportunity of growth or transformation in this experience? And then if it's somebody outside of us, like a world leader that's really triggering, then it could be, do I need a break here for a bit? Do I need to kind of just take a minute and step back and not be watching certain shows or podcasts or reading certain articles or things that are really kind of stirring me up? Because it's important that we can really cultivate our peace or our minimum neutrality. So sometimes we need to just take a step back so that we can be in our own energy field and we can cultivate that, and we can then kind of get a sense too, is this an unresolved energy for me? Is that why I'm being triggered so much? Or am I now being hijacked by, kind of the collective, the thought forms on the world stage? Because there's so much intensity going on collectively right now, which means there's more intensity in those thought forms, which means we're going to be more influenced and impacted by them because they've got a strong movement right now. That doesn't mean we can't not be. It just means we want to be more aware of, is this actually serving me? Is this cultivating what I'm really wanting to cultivate in my life, which we'll get into in step 3 in a second, because that's the clarity and the alignment. Back to evaluation, though, we want to really ask ourselves, like, what is this about? So am I learning, growing, and healing something? And do I need to set a boundary up? Do I need to learn how to speak my truth in this situation or with this person? So it could be, look, like, you can't speak to me that way, or this doesn't feel good for me. So I get that you're going through something, but I'm going to, withdraw myself for a second and go to another room and let you calm down. So it could be something like that. It could be just, why is this presenting for me? And when we have that kind of understanding, that really, again, helps us to emotionally regulate, and it helps us to find purpose into why something's attracting. Because the thing is that often when we feel we don't have a say in something, we feel helpless in something or powerless in a situation, that can really, create more disempowerment for sure for us. And that's often when we start to give energy more to that situation or that person, and we become more hijacked. It's said that if we can be triggered by somebody, then we can be manipulated by that person as well. So again, just, in order for us to really stay empowered and sovereign, we want to stay in our heart space, and we want to be able to come back into that neutrality. And that may take a while. That may take some time. It might take a process to do that. But when we can do that, we can't be messed with, right? We can stay in our own sovereignty no matter what's going on around us. And then we can come into our own alignment. So step number 3 is clarity and alignment. So this is where we're really coming back into our heart center, and we're clear on what it is that we want. And sometimes those situations show up for us so that we can actually get more clear. So for example, if we're being sensitive to anger, it could be like, you know what, I'm not okay anymore with this energy. Or maybe I've never been okay with this energy. I just haven't known what to do with it. So I'm going to start with, that clarity that, and we want to say this in the positive. I'm clear now that I want peace instead of this. I want kindness instead of this. Or I want consideration or respect. I need more softness or more gentleness. I need more clear, effective, considerate communication, as an example. What is it that we're wanting? So once we have that clarity, we can get into that alignment, or we can come back into our heart center much more easy. Again, we aren't always going to be able to necessarily hold and maintain a consciousness, or I should say a vibration, a frequency of love or peace. The key for us though is becoming aware, when did I get pulled out of my heart? When did I get pulled out of that alignment that I've been trying to hold? And then how quick can I come back into it? And that's really, those are our power steps, is when we can have that kind of awareness and then that ability. And it is, it's kind of a muscle we have to learn how to work and strengthen. And the more we do it, the more easy it becomes and the more automatic it can be for us. So we want to come back into our alignment. And the other thing is, when we're clear on what it is that we really do want to experience, we can hold that for that other person. And we potentially then are offering, we're not responsible for somebody else's responses. We're not responsible for somebody else's emotions. Though, when we're in a space where we can hold, ourselves in our heart space, and we can hold a higher frequency, though, we can then offer, just through our presence, holding that space, not engaging in the dynamic, we're now holding a space of a different vibration for that person potentially to come in. When we're responding differently, we call forth, just by proxy, a higher aspect of that person to be able to come through. So we're supporting their own growth or their own healing just by focusing on our own, alignment, and our own staying in our own heart center. So that's also the beautiful element of being able to stay in our heart. But we're also going to be very clear on, what do we need in this minute, in this situation, in this dynamic. One of the most powerful things, I think, for us, when we're responding with somebody who's got a very strong energy, it's often we don't feel safe. We don't feel safe, or we don't feel, and that can, that in of itself can activate trauma in us. That can activate, our nervous system, our inner child can get activated. So we also want to potentially, especially if we're dealing with somebody that's going to take us a bit to work through, like, you can't be out of this relationship right now. And so it could be a colleague, it could be someone you're living with. So it could be just, what are some tools that I can use for myself while I'm dealing with this energy, while I'm trying to break this process, while I'm trying to break this, dynamic. So that means, when we're starting to get really triggered and don't feel safe, that's where we'll usually disconnect from our heart, because that's our ego mind will take over. Our ego will be like, we're not safe here. We need to be safe. And sometimes we need that. Absolutely. Generally, what we want to do, though, is we want to be able to stay connected to our heart. So that's where we're in our power and our alignment. But we're very clear. I need to withdraw myself. I need to remove myself from the situation now. Or I need to just down some water so that I can get neutral, or so I can calm my emotions, so that I can now start to respond effectively or communicate differently with this person or with this situation. So, it can vary, and we do want to always make sure that we are taking care and supporting ourselves and keeping ourselves definitely safe. So again, it will depend on the dynamic. It will depend on the situation. And of course, we want to use our discernment always for that. And then the fourth step is the power of choice. Everything for us really right now, moving forward in these next couple of years, especially, is just really starting to activate our sovereignty, which means I have the power to choose. I don't always have control, or I don't always have say or input or impact or influence on things that are going on outside of me directly. I do, though, have the power to choose how I want to respond. So once we're emotionally regulated, once we've gone through that clarity of what is this about for me, coming back into our heart center and our alignment and we're clear back kind of in our own energy field, in our body, grounded and steady and anchored there, then we can choose how we want to respond. And so we are empowered in that. And we are also really starting to disrupt those patterns from the past. And we are starting to create new pathways for our future. We're doing it empowered. We're doing it steady in the present moment. And, we keep trying it and we keep doing it, approaching it gently and lovingly until we feel that we can just, either that dynamic will no longer be able to sustain itself. So that person may still have, things to heal, but if our energy field is strong enough, our frequency, we're able to hold it high enough, they won't be able to come at us anymore in our energy field. They'll have to match our energy. And if we still find ourselves sometimes in that, depending on, kind of where we're working or what we're doing, then it won't impact us anymore because it will ping off our energy field, our auric field, because of the vibration we're holding. So it's complex really right now because there's, for ourselves, we might have a lot going on. We're trying to really, be in our heart center and hold these higher frequencies. We might have a lot of healing that's coming up and out too. We might be doing that for ourselves. We might be doing that on behalf of our lineage or the collective. And then we also have this energy that's coming at us, again, discerning, is this a projection? Is this mine? And when we are able to come back into what is ours, this is again where we're able to really be able to choose our response and choose how we want to feel. Choose to heal it, choose to, just kind of keep withdrawing our energy, choose to understand it. Because in the final kind of note here, one of our most beautiful things that we can do at this time and empowered things additionally to the power of choice is to step out of judgment. So if we're sovereign, we want to focus on, we want to be free. We're all cultivating, working towards that. We're all, I should say, evolving towards that. That also means that we want to be able to allow somebody else to be where they're at in their process. Most of the time, when somebody's healing, definitely awakening, starting to see things that they didn't see before, usually an initial response is anger or grief or fear. So that person may need to go through that process. And it's important that they go through those stages and those steps. It's not right or wrong or good or bad. It's what are we doing with it? But if that person's not there yet, they don't have the awareness yet, or they need just some time to move through some pretty intense energy and just kind of get a handle, on things, we don't have to have a judgment about it. We are responsible for ourselves. Again, if energetically or emotionally or mentally or physically that doesn't feel safe, healthy, or good for us, it's not of resonance with us, we have the power to choose what we want to do with that. And additionally, can we hold empathy? Can we hold compassion for somebody else while they're in their process? If somebody is experiencing usually that toxic energy or behavior, or going through that behavior, they're wounded in some way. There's a wound there. Oftentimes it can be their inner child activated, or it can be some type of wound that's unresolved they're not necessarily aware of. It could be just stored in their subconscious and it's coming out, or they could be aware of it. They just haven't gotten to that point yet of readiness or ability to actually start that healing process. Or maybe they're in it and this is just the stage they're in. So, in that power of choice, can we also come at it from a place of understanding and empathy, holding a space, again, which is much easier once we've regulated, once we've come back into our heart, then can we come back and say, can I approach this in a different way? We often also don't see all of the variables, or the perspectives as sometimes until after the fact. And even like what's playing out on the world stage, for example, there could be a lot of things playing out right now that don't make sense or that are triggering, you like crazy. And it could be just not all the pieces are complete yet. And so on the other side of this, and maybe that's not even for another couple of years, definitely next year, things will start to make more sense potentially because we'll be on the other side of it. So our invitation is to ask ourselves personally, How do I want to show up right now in this time? How do I want to show up with people? How do I want to relate to people? How do I want to relate to life? How do I want to relate to experiences? So if I'm relating to a person or a situation with anger, with frustration, with disgust, then that's how I'm relating to it. I can choose, I have the power to choose to do something different in that. I can relate to it curiously, or I can relate to it from my heart center, which means I'm going to step back. Doesn't mean I condone it, doesn't mean I necessarily agree with it, but can I come into the acceptance that this is what's happening right now? This is what it is. Can I accept that that person is where they're at right now and responding or acting out the way they are? I don't have to necessarily understand the why they're doing that. Can I just come into, an acceptance that this is what's really actually happening at this time? That doesn't, again, mean that we're succumbing to it or we're saying we're okay with the behavior. What we're just doing is we're starting at that place of, I'm accepting that this is what's happening now. How is this affecting me? What do I want to come into alignment with after I've evaluated what this is about for me? And then I have the power to choose how I want to respond, how I want to relate to it, how I want to communicate. Maybe I need to communicate and I'm communicating differently. It could be any of these variables at different times. So another final thing, another fun thing that we can do if we're having a really hard time dealing with somebody, we can also take a look at what character are they playing in our play. So we're creating our play. Our life is our play, and everybody that's in our life is basically a character in our play. And so sometimes that's a kind of a fun way to remove ourselves from, just so much of the intensity of the situation and be able to say, what character is this person playing for me right now? Are they the villain? Are they the lover? Are they the guide? Are they the healer? What is it? What's their character? And we can have fun with that, and we can just kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of done with the villain, and so I'm gonna write something else. But we want to go through the steps of, why am I attracting a villain? What is this about in my play? What learning, growing, healing opportunity is there for us? All right, so those 4 steps, if it resonates, can be very helpful just to kind of like keep us back into our own center and our own grounded space, clarity. So the 4 steps, just quick review, are emotional regulations. Number 1. Number 2 is evaluation. Number 3 is clarity and alignment, getting into the heart center, coming back into the heart center. And number 4 is power of choice. So wishing you a very calm, beautiful, and regulated day. Namaste.